wool is amazing in terms of, fire retardancy. You'd 100% want your baby to be wearing, wool next to their skin, to be sleeping with wool. Wool is used as insulation by the National Trust. So yes, it has amazing fire protection properties.
Welcome to Transcend Matter. This podcast aims to explore the fascinating interplay of materials that not only redefine aesthetics, but address pressing human and environmental challenges. Every episode is brought to you by me, Emma Wright, a material developer and researcher, to converse with material experts from either an academic, designer, or research background. We'll be diving into their practice, exploring cross-collaboration and their connection with materials. Hello everybody, this episode is honouring Wool Month. Yes, this October is officially Wool Month, and it is celebrating and honouring the amazing protein fibre, yarn and cloth that comes from a variety of cute little fluffy sheeps from across the UK and also around the world. Wool Month is supported by Woolmark and the British Wool Association. This episode is going to have Rebecca Kelley, who is part of the UK Woolmark team. She has been with Woolmark for over 17 years, and I'm very excited for her to share all her amazing technical and also emotional and personal knowledge with the fibre that is wool. She touched on a few topics in regards to the wool wastage we have in the UK, how can we retain material value through the product, and alternative and novel innovation that's going on in the space of wool right now. So please do head to the more information for this episode and click on the links to learn more about both those associations. This recording is actually the first time we've had a company. Normally we have engineers, startups, more individual designers and artists, but I'm really excited to kind of expand upon those special spaces of research and positive communications on low impact and sustainable fibres. So Woolmark has been around since the 1930s and originally started in Australia to promote the merino wool industry. It essentially represents a commitment between wool growers, brands, and consumers on the authenticity and the quality of fibre that is wool, providing transparent systems and also just research learning platforms where brands, buyers, and people who are just generally curious about the fibre of wool can go in and learn and understand all the beautiful things that this fibre can do, and also the new spaces that it's currently developing in some fun labs across the globe. So, without much ado, I hope you enjoyed this recording, and I look forward to hearing your feedback. Enjoy. I know you're like super busy, so
Oh no, it's a great pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
no, that's okay. And congratulations on the Wool Innovate grant.
Oh, thanks, Emma. I know.
Oh.
It is exciting, an important first milestone.
Yeah, absolutely. So Rebecca, I kind of first met you through the company I used to work with at Volleybag, and I was sourcing some basically high performance wool fabric. I'm going to put that in a really broad term.
Yeah.
And I think what I was after was fabric that really sung the amazing technicalities of wool in all different ways. And you were just an amazing resource at Woolmark. And I think a lot of the
Yeah.
speakers I've had on have been very focused on products they're developing, especially in like the material space. But this is the first time I've actually brought in an organization.
Ah.
Yeah, you are the first organization, which is really cool. And it's very focused on one fiber type, which is wool. So there might be quite a few people listening, I guess, who don't know too much about Woolmark. And I
Yeah.
would love you to or invite you to
Yeah.
chat about and yeah.
Yeah. Oh, thanks, Emma. And maybe that's testament, to the fact that Woolmark is such a unique entity. Obviously, we don't sell or produce anything, and we're really, I guess, an aggregator of opportunity in wool. Be that sort of research and development, education, sourcing. So really, we offer such a full range of resources and it's of course free. So the idea is that we want to, reduce, I guess, the friction in you sourcing and being able to use wool. We want to be able to bring you closer together with the important players in the supply chain. So it's, to be honest, it's such a great company to work for because, it's so diverse and, we're working globally. And it's exciting to be able to open up what is typically quite a closed industry. It's quite hard to get access, to see what goes on behind closed doors. I just one example is if you go to Premier Vision, for instance, in Paris, everyone's behind these white walls. And for somebody starting out in the industry, it is really hard to gain access to people and information. So to be able to bring that in such an accessible way is really fulfilling.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it's really interesting you highlighted everything or majority of contacts, communications, ideas like being locked behind closed walls. And I think there's a lot of traction trying to open that up. Like Walmart is
Yeah,
amazing at doing that.
yeah,
Why do you think that that sort of dynamic has existed in the first place? Do you think it's like industry trying to highlight their technology and their contacts for like particular products? Is that sort of very much that commercialized
yeah.
capitalist viewpoint in that regard?
Yeah, I don't think it's intentional necessarily. I
Mm,
think that it's a very traditional industry that hasn't
yeah,
changed very much in hundreds of years, and I think it's hard to digitalize that industry and to make it more accessible. Even well-known larger companies are still using very antiquated back-end systems,
yeah,
and so everything you need to touch base with the key point of contact, and then many emails later you actually get to the crux of the material that they have available. Do they have it in stock? What colors do they have it in stock? And
mm,
so it's a very manual process, and I think that the suppliers and manufacturers are eager to share, but just the infrastructure is just, it's not sort of moved with the times.
yeah.
And I
Interesting.
think we are really seeing a desire for to bring people in, and to I guess modernize, and we collaborate very closely with the supply chain, and they very much want to be on this journey with us, through education, through tools that Woolmark have, like the Wool Lab, for instance, which
Mm,
shows many different fabrics from different suppliers. And I should say that was quite a big deal, bringing the Wool Lab online, and that
yeah,
suppliers would be shown next to other suppliers. And what about copying?
yeah,
Um, but I suppose if someone copies, it's a testament to how great your fabric is, and there's many opportunities beyond that risk. The upside is a lot greater than the downside,
yeah.
I think, and they see that today.
So yeah, I think from just going back to how the suppliers' products are being put next to each other, and you kind of exposing who's
Yeah,
associated with what technicality of that fabric article. And I guess for some people who might be listening, might not realize how tight that industry is. Like my background of sourcing and designing and engineering fabrics is quite a few years, but and even within that it's still been
yeah,
super tight. I remember when I used to work for a premium brand in Italy, we would like shred stuff, anything that wasn't put through on the
yeah,
catwalk or even like pre collections were shredded. And I used to think, does anyone really care? Is anyone really gonna get this?
yeah,
But it's this
yeah,
weird, like, I'm gonna just say paranoia that is like festered sometimes in the industry, that people just like, I guess it's just the worry that they spent so many resources and so much time creating these beautiful fabrics, and to someone just to come in and copy it, they've just lost their IP, almost their livelihood, because it's very hard to get technical IP around an actual fabric. It's usually the
yes,
machinery
that's
that's made
right.
the fabric. So
Yeah,
it's yeah,
it's uh I would say that it's, I think increasingly that's changing because people see the bigger picture.
Mm.
It's anybody can knock off somebody's, and we've seen it over the years. In China, the Chinese manufacturers are able to knock off the European suppliers in terms of the colors, the patterns, the aesthetics. But what they're lacking is the authenticity, and they're lacking the
Mm.
backstory. And
Mm.
I think people are a lot more cognizant and interested in that backstory. And without
Yeah.
it, it just doesn't carry the same weight. So I think companies that have spent the work and the time developing and can proudly talk to that, people see the value in that.
Yeah.
And if they do want to knock fabrics off, you're not going to stop them. But they are
Mm.
going to be lacking a dimension.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think there's definitely been a lot of traction in regards to that need, that requirement,
Hmm.
especially in transparency of the whole supply
Yeah,
chain. I think
yeah,
people have always like cared and valued that, but people are actively, proactively um, putting that into implementing that essentially. Um,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, super interesting. Yeah, no, go for it.
I was no, I was gonna mention that um no, I've lost my train of thought now.
No, you're
I've
good. It's
lost my
all
train.
good.
Carry on,
It's
Emma.
a Friday. No, it's
I'll
a
come back to
Friday.
it.
No, I'm already on that. I've had 2 coffees a day, and I keep telling myself, Emma, you don't need a third. But my body's like,
No,
definitely
you
need a
don't.
third. You'll be so much happier after a third. I'm like, no, don't do it.
It'd be too much.
I know. So I know what's amazing about wool. I'm a huge fan of wool. I love the whole like a range of sheeps and the potential mechanical like characteristics of each sheep, and it's fascinating to me. But I didn't know if you can kind of give like a really beautiful overview for people who might not realize how amazing wool is, because I think a lot of people associate it with
Yeah,
obviously like the carpet industry, British wool being quite coarse on the whole, not all species. um and probably just like woolly jumpers that were made as a kid, and they're just like, no, why would I want that?
yeah,
Like I can
yeah,
completely get it. So, and probably
yeah, yeah,
price, like at the minute it can be is a higher price than the like
yeah,
plastics synthetics industry. So I mean there's a
yeah.
whole plethora of reasons why that's existing. But yeah, no,
Yeah.
tell us why wool is so wonderful.
Oh, well, you sort of touched on it in the introduction there to the question, but it is such a diverse fiber. It's produced, in different places around the world, and that wool is there to protect the animal in the different climates that the sheep is living in, and I think what's incredible is that it's a living, breathing fiber. So it's grown to support that animal, whether it's in the Yorkshire Dales, in the northern hemisphere where the weather is quite harsh, or if it's in the southern hemisphere in Australia, for instance, and where again the weather can be really varied from cold to hot, but perhaps it's more extreme, and tends to be on the hotter side. And we have merino, and then which is the breed typically found in the southern hemisphere, although there is some merino sheep in the UK still. So I think the diversity is key, and being able to choose the right wool for the right end product. And you spoke about this notion of the itchy scratchy school jumper, and of course that is something that we conjure in our minds when we think about wool. But really, wool can be super coarse, so it can be, think of Harris tweed, think of it being, used in jackets to protect against thorns, and being used in the Scottish Highlands, to super fine merino suiting and knitwear, and next to skin underwear as well. I mean, just to put it in context, our hair is about 60 micron, which is the fiber diameter. So yeah, the diameter of our hair, and the finest wool is around 9 micron. And it goes all the way up to, so the higher the number, the coarser the fiber, it goes all the way up to sort of 40 micron. Cashmere is around 12 to 15 micron. And the wool that we typically use is around 18 to 19 micron in sort of fashion and next to skin. Um, but these are all sort of technical terms and aspects that most people wouldn't even imagine they would have to think about when specifying what kind of wool they want to use. So it is super important for buyers to be aware of different types of wool and what's appropriate for an end product. Because if you put in a wool that's too coarse into something that's designed to be worn next to the skin, then it's going to cause an issue. And you don't want consumers to have this idea that wool is itchy scratchy when in fact it isn't. So it's important to be aware of those differences. And you wouldn't use a fine wool to go into carpet, for instance, because it's not going to have the same durability as a coarser, more robust wool. So there's performance elements to consider as well as the aesthetics and the handle.
Yeah, that was a
Um,
fantastic description.
and I suppose I haven't really touched on, some of the properties that wool has, like its ability to, regulate temperature. So
Yeah.
we say when it's, cold, it keeps you warm, and when it's hot, it keeps you cool. And that's because it has the ability to be dynamic and respond to the
Mm,
environment that you're in. So, it's absorbing moisture and releasing moisture all the time. And,
yeah.
if you're caught in the rain and you're running in a base layer and it gets wet, you will get a perceived warmth, versus, wearing jeans in the rain. They get cold and wet and heavy, whereas wool will warm up and sort of protect you, in the mountains or whatever. So it's super unique in that point of view. And companies have been trying to imitate the properties of wool in lab, for many years, and trying to confer that into synthetic materials. But you just can't get that dynamic capability, that,
Mm.
ability to react to the situation that the material is in, which is unique, especially for sports and performance.
I think this is where my sort of BDI is really focusing on is that natural performance and
Yeah,
how can we optimize that within a technical weave or I guess knit as well.
yeah,
Which will then really sort of highlight those natural characteristics of wool. And what is even crazy is that this is just grown naturally on a sheep. And I know some species have been interbred to perform like different sort of microns per se, but it's amazing what nature has already provided for us. And obviously, with the introduction of plastics decades ago, we've just almost just completely dismissed what was already at our fingertips, and opposed to investing more money and time and sort of data driven sort of testing, where we could have really, I think, well, we can still do this now potentially, drive this amazing regenerative source into a whole new plane. We've just unfortunately just spent so much time on something that's just been so destructive within synthetics. And I think that's where a lot of the consumer behavior, but then also the brand and designer behavior really needs to kick in. And I hear a lot of conversations saying, whose responsibility is this? Is it the brands, or is it the consumer, or is it the manufacturers? And for me, ultimately, the key catalyst has always been the brands and the designers, and they need to take genuine agency over the products they are creating. Super, super
yeah.
tricky though.
It is, and cost really comes
A
into
huge
it,
issue,
and
yeah.
availability, and volume, and you're right with the availability of synthetics. Coming out of the Second World War, nylons, polyesters, viscose. It really dominated, and wool was such a popular material. Really, it suffered in those post-war years with the advancements in the synthetics industry. Um, Look, it's a niche fiber. It's around 1.2% world fiber share. And it's not that we're looking to grow that fiber share. So it's about creating a sustainable industry for growers, and so that they can make a livelihood out of producing wool. And look, there are differences in the countries that produce wool. So, for instance, in Australia, there is the infrastructure that allows wool as a primary output to be valued, whereas in the
Mm.
UK, wool is never the primary output.
Mm.
It's almost like a waste.
Yeah.
The sheep is primarily being bred for meat,
Yeah.
and it's a bit of a pain that the animal has to be sheared, which is terrible because it's such
Yeah.
a valuable resource and ingredient. And I think there is lots of innovation about what we can do to, add value to that waste, if you like, in the northern hemisphere, certainly. But obviously, the value is super high in the southern hemisphere. But cost does come into it, and wool is a lot more complex than producing something in the lab that can be super consistent and replicable. You're dealing with people, you're dealing with animals, you're dealing with the weather. There are so many variants, and it just makes it a lot more complex. Which is tough for companies, if they want the efficiency, the streamline, the guarantees, and they want to keep price low. But I think obviously as we've gone into this period, sort of just prior to COVID and now really after COVID, where the environment is of acute concern and people are doubling down on the efforts that they're making. People are really seeing wool as an important part of a reduced impact strategy. And over the last 8 to 10 years, we've seen companies that were primarily focused on synthetics move in to having a wool dimension as part of their offering, which has been exciting.
Amazing. And I think it's really interesting how you're not looking to increase that percentage uptake. You're almost trying to add the value or
Value.
retain the material value that's lost in a lot of those
That's
in
right.
those manufacturing streams. And I'm sure quite a few people might realize that a lot of this wool, especially in the UK, does get burnt once it's sheared, and it's one of the few reasons. Well, one of the couple of the reasons that this happens, and I'm interested if you agree, is one, the farmers are just like, well, there's no need for me to have it. We either compost it or burn it. It's a waste of material resource because they don't make enough money when they sell that hide, that skein. Well, it's not a hide, sorry,
Yeah.
skein. And if someone is going to buy it, then the amount of resources they've gone in just to shear it, they're in negative costings. So there is just no inspiration for them to even consider retaining that material value into another product after it's been sheared from the sheep. And I'm really
Yeah.
interested, do you think in the southern hemisphere, especially in Australia, where that will has its value, do you think it's because of the sheep type, i.e. there's more merino and it can be used in a lot more high performance and softer products? Or is it actually just a whole mentality, the whole system is a very different setup to what we have
Yeah.
in the UK?
Yeah, I'd say both. So, first of all, British wool are very active in the
Yeah.
UK, and
Mm,
compared to some other places in Europe,
yeah.
do a very good job of providing, the collection and the selling of the wool, which is great and it's important. But they do, you're quite right. The growers don't get very much for the wool. And that's because it is a much coarser wool, and the type of products that wool would go into don't typically have the same price point as the products that merino wool, predominantly grown in the southern hemisphere, goes into. Um, yes, what was the? Give me the rest of the
No, it's
question
okay.
again, Emma.
No, it's okay. All good. It's more curious about if the systems in the farming systems in Australia
Yes.
are more, yeah.
Yes,
What's the
it's
comparison
true.
to
They
UK?
are. Yes, it's a different level of organization.
Interesting.
So it's a huge industry because wool is a primary valuable output, and it's a really important export for Australia is
Yeah.
wool. And Australian Wool Innovation, which own the Woolmark company, are funded also by the Australian government as well as by the Australian wool growers. So they're our shareholders, and they vote every 3 years the percentage of their wool sales that go into the company. So yeah, we act on their behalf. We are the research and development and education marketing arm for the Australian wool growers. And yeah, they have a much more sophisticated system of of um, uh, categorizing the wool and capturing that, and they have different organizations that support in that process. So yeah, because it is a primary output that exists, whereas in the UK it's very, very limited.
Yeah. That's really interesting. And do you think it's limited because it's relying on old systems, like you're saying, pre World War II, and there hasn't been the need to update those systems since then because synthetics have just kind of like dominated? This is a really tricky one. So I discussed this
Yeah,
with a lot of people. Yeah. Mm.
I think because the wool doesn't have that value, people aren't
Yeah.
keeping sheep for their wool.
Yeah.
It's really for the meat,
Yeah. And
and
it's,
wool is a byproduct. And I think, I mean, we know that wool is actually a category 3 environmental pollutant now, which is
mm-hmm.
so shocking, which is why some people are burning and incinerating their wool,
Mm,
because they're not allowed to just keep it on the land. If it hasn't got a value stream, they can't just keep it on their land. And it is expensive to get it taken away. But I do understand for British wool that it's actually a very small percentage of people that are burning their wool, and
yeah.
that
Yeah, of
British wool
course.
do a great
Yeah.
job of capturing the
Yeah.
majority of it and making sure there is a value chain for that wool. But there is so much more I think we could do with wool, with coarser wools that go undervalued. And there is a lot of R&D happening in this
Yeah.
space, which is exciting.
There's a lot of focus on fire resistance as well, which I'm super interested in, especially in regards to interiors. There's a hot focus on low impact fabrics. I guess you can call them sustainable, but I prefer the term low impact materials
Yeah.
used in the fashion. But a lot of people forget about interiors, and most interiors that are made within the UK can't actually be recycled because of the very strong FR coatings they have on all the
Yes.
products.
Yes. Yes.
And there's been some very interesting tests and research gone into, okay, do a lot of people die from fire related deaths within the home? Is it actually from the fire, or is it from the byproducts of those coatings on fire? Yeah, so there's a whole, I can put this in the description of like reference points for people to read later. So what a lot of people are starting to explore, especially universities and other alternative research platforms, is looking at bio-based FR coatings that have a slightly lower standard but still allow people to move away from the fire quicker without becoming intoxicated from the fumes that are coming off from them. So wool's quite interesting because I think, bear with me if I might quote this wrong, I think the high nitrogen within the fibers, it basically just burns slower. It's literally, it just allows you to get away quicker. And a lot of people think FR is like, it doesn't burn at all. No, it's always going to burn. It's just how the characteristics of burning. So it doesn't drip, it doesn't spread easily onto other products. So that is like a real focus, I think, be quite interesting, because a lot of people think
Yeah.
FR or PPE, personal protection, or high performance fabrics within military or space need to be synthetics. And actually, if we go back to our roots, quote,
Yeah.
what does a bio or a bio blend look like? So
Yeah.
do you
Yeah.
feel like that could be a really great catalyst to drive more value into um, other forms of wool that are merino? So
Yeah.
that
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's so interesting because, the London Fire Brigade, when it was first
yes,
created,
yes,
they were all wearing wool, the
right, yeah,
military all wore wool. And, A.W. Hainsworth up in Yorkshire, an amazing mill that, are still producing those beautiful, military ceremonial cloths, and are at the cutting edge of innovation, and are supplying, many police and fire services around the world with their wool blend technical fabrics. And so, yeah, wool is amazing in terms of, fire retardancy. You'd 100% want your baby to be wearing, wool next to their skin, to be sleeping with wool. Wool is used as insulation by the National Trust. So yes, it has amazing fire protection properties. And it's exciting to see where Hainsworth have taken it. And I think that they supply the majority of the Australian rural fire services because their material is a lot lighter than some of the urban firefighters' kit. They're contending with different reasons for the fire, and they're encountering, because it's not an urban environment, it's a rural environment. They are able to wear uniform that is more versatile, helps them manage their heat regulation. And I think there's a growing opportunity, because what I understand from Hainsworth is that actually the causes of most of the fires that they deal with in cities actually doesn't have some of the elements that they've built into their typical protection gear. So actually they could use more wool in their kit, and they could have more versatile kit. So it would allow these organizations to pay a slightly higher price and have something like wool integrated for something that was be able to be used for multiple purposes. So I think, just evaluating how these protective clothings are used, and I guess evaluating what fibers can bring value and support those workers in those situations.
Thank you so much for those insights. It's something I think for me to digest a little bit further, and I think it's a really good
Yeah,
focus point in regard how wool can be used opposed to outside jumpers like we were referencing earlier. So I
yeah,
feel like,
absolutely.
yeah,
It's amazing how
yeah,
over the years wool is now used in conjunction with many technical
yeah,
fibers, and when I first started with Woolmark around 17 years ago, it was all about understanding wool, and now it's about understanding how wool interacts with these other
mm,
materials. And I think that's a real special sort of IP that Hainsworth have, is how do they weave wool into those technical fabrics alongside, your Kevlar or aramid
yeah,
fibers? Where do you place wool in the weave? What kind of yarns do you use, and what is the spinning tech
mm,
that's used for those yarns? Again, just optimize wool in those different settings.
yeah. 17 years at Woolmark. I'm just going
I
to take that
know.
fact there. That's amazing.
I know, it's hard to believe.
That's fantastic. You very rarely hear that. So clearly this is something like really close to your heart, which is really lovely to
Yeah,
hear.
I mean, you're right, you do. And sometimes I feel a bit apologetic for it, because it feels like it's
No.
not the done thing to stay anywhere for more than sort of 3 to 5 years. But it's just given me so much. I've never
Yeah.
stopped learning. And I think I came into Woolmark at a time where there just wasn't a glass ceiling. There was so many opportunities in different parts of the world and in different parts of the supply chain. So it's always challenged me. So I'm super grateful for that.
That's really refreshing to hear as well. 'Cause I think a lot of people, when they want to move somewhere, is because they stop learning, or
Yeah,
they feel they can't add value to somewhere. So it's lovely that that space provides you with that. I think that's really really beautiful.
yeah,
Um, I feel like going back to our conversation
yeah.
quickly. I feel like I really just want to find a solution to add value to like UK war, and there's so many things being pinged off in like the ether, especially on LinkedIn and like our own personal
I
conversations
know,
and groups and
I
stuff. And you
know.
just like want to just go, yeah, it's cool. There's all these crazy things for it, but it's so interconnected and so messy, I guess, as well. It's
Yeah,
just
it's hard to
I
get to
I
the root of
I
the
know, and
problem.
I want to give exactly, and I really want to give listeners like something to take away, and I'm just like, just go out there and learn more and try to understand like your own buying habits, I guess, and like why do you buy things and what's close to your heart, and if people can take like more forms of active care within their role as designer or a sourcer or a manufacturer to kind of one, retain material value, but to create those sort of lower impact articles, I guess. So
Yeah, yeah.
it's
I
hard.
think it is hard. I think what I find really interesting is the intersection of wool as quite a heritage, traditional fibre with modern technology.
Nice. I like
And
that. Yeah.
I think I mentioned before that it's been interesting to see some of the companies that were solely focused on synthetics start to integrate wool into their thinking, and
Mm.
they of course come at it from a different angle. We've been working with a really interesting company in Italy called Teana that
Oh,
are
yes, they're great.
yeah, they
Ah, it's
specialize in performance. Matteo,
yes,
is it
yeah, and I
Matteo?
know
Is it?
He's got a great name, Maximiliano. Yeah, yeah, he's
Italian
Tayano, very
name.
very cool. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, well, we have a great office in Italy, and my colleague Birgit works very closely with Tayana, and they're specialists in elastomeric performance yarns. But it's been so exciting to see how they've integrated wool into their propositions for cycling, shorts, leggings, for swimwear as well. So a new iteration of wool used in swimming costume
Which is
material. You're like,
crazy. I love
wow,
it.
it's
Yeah,
mad.
and they're the technical team to go deep on that fiber as well. They're not just
Yeah,
trying to swap out something. They're going deep and trying to really understand how they can push that fiber's performance.
yeah.
Yeah, really, really amazing team.
And then the other way to look at it is, Hainsworth coming from, that area of tradition, but then applying technology. So coming from the
Yeah.
heartland of wool, but then,
Mm,
putting it through new thinking and new technology. So I think there's real opportunity with wool because it is has such a unique chemical and physical makeup, and it's rich in amino acids and so many
sure.
different
Yeah.
aspects that actually, even if you took it down to its bare bones, to the keratin sort of protein, it is possible to rebuild that again into new materials, and
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
think of wool as a feedstock into new fibers and materials is also exciting. There's a great company in New Zealand called Woolchemy,
Mhm.
and it was started by a woman who grew up on a wool growing property in New Zealand and was just so saddened by the coarser wool just not going to good use. Um, and she worked with the CSIRO, which is an agricultural research organization in Australia and New Zealand, and she's created wool that can be used as an alternative to synthetics in things like sanitary products, in
Yeah.
nappies.
Amazing.
So there's really cool stuff going on in the R&D space to up value lower value wool, even if you have to strip it back to its bare bones.
Yeah. Do you think wool, maybe this is a very creative way of looking at the world, I don't know, but do you think wool can be almost like be a catalyst to the R&D behind wool, to be a catalyst to kind of break down those sort of boundaries and those walls people have put up around products and development, within the mills and manufacturing? Because you talk about Tiana, and you've linked in with Walmart, and Walmart's got like HQs all over Europe, around the world. I
Mm,
feel like it could be quite an inspirational example of how, if we cross collaborate a little bit more
yeah,
potentially, especially just around one fiber or one product. I think I mentioned on a previous podcast is that in Japan the mills are really interesting in how they also cross collaborate. So two or three mills, or one mill specialize in one output, and then they'll collaborate with another one to create a whole new article, but they'll have like a joint IP, or depending on what it is on that article. Well, mostly in Europe everyone just keeps to one mill. Very rarely you see
yeah,
someone in Switzerland collaborate with someone in Italy. Like I personally haven't heard of it. I know someone buys in a product, but they don't do a cross collaboration. So maybe wool could be
yes.
the way.
Yes, yes. And look, the opportunities there, and this is something that I think is really important to Woolmark and really important to the work I've been involved in. And we really want to create opportunity, and as I said before, reduce the number of obstacles that brands have
Mm,
got in front of them to commercialize something new in wool.
yeah.
And we wanted to create some infrastructure that would support that end goal in terms of innovating, and for that innovation to reach the market. And we've got an amazing processing, innovation, and product development team at Woolmark around the world.
Mm-hmm.
We're quite a small team, but we've got quite a nice reach across the Americas and Europe and Asia. And we want to sort of work with our local supply chains and our local brands. And I suppose we want to get to the point where we can have these sort of half-baked loaves of bread. So, we're validating something to a certain point at which, a brand could come in and put their own stamp on that. But we've taken them part of the way, half of the way, to sort of validate a proof of concept, if you like. And we found the most effective way of doing that was partnering with the machinery manufacturers, for instance,
Mm,
partnering with a spinner, not just going to a mill and running some developments, because often that would then stay with the mill. And what we want to do is make this available. We want to be able to transfer that technology to supply chains that weren't familiar with working with wool or weren't familiar with a certain technique. It's been a really rewarding route to have taken. We work very closely with Santoni, the circular knit machine manufacturer. We work closely with Stoll and Shima, and with a number of spinners across the world to trial different yarns with the technology that's available, and that has allowed us to bring things part way to market for brands to then pick up and take the rest of the way.
yeah. Amazing. So you provided that space for them to, they don't have to be an expert on everything, but they can take away those bite-sized information to then, yeah, bring it to market.
Yeah,
And
and
hopefully also, yeah, yeah.
no, I was going to say, and run tests and really, provide that validation that gives brands the assurance or the ability to then go the rest of the way. And then of course we can work with them on bringing that to market, and talking to their customers about the benefits. And
Mm. I think that storytelling is really vital
yeah,
within anything, but I think especially within wool because it does at the moment have a slightly higher price up markup. People are like, oh,
yeah,
why do I buy that? Why invest in that? So I think storytelling is a very powerful tool from both like yourselves and the manufacturers,
yeah,
but then also from the brands. I think it's really vital. What other
yeah, yeah.
woolly projects have you been up to? I know you've been up to a few things recently. I don't know if you want to divulge in those.
Yes, I have been working on a side project in children's footwear, and
Mhm.
it's funny, footwear has really, I guess, taken off in the last 12 years or so. I'm trying to think when Allbirds came online. It's like,
Oh, I
but
think a decade, less than a decade. Yeah. No.
yeah,
When was it? No,
yeah.
actually. Hmm.
But yeah, just seeing wool used in footwear has really grown. And again, that's a great example of a complex product where wool is in and amongst, all sorts of different materials that aren't compatible with wool necessarily. And obviously that's a challenge when it comes to recycling and the whole movement towards, should we just go monofiber or should we, embrace wool and synthetics, and how do we do that? But I've been developing a kids footwear brand, and we really wanted to innovate in, the material toolbox that we utilize for that. And I think we have the opportunity in children's footwear, particular with it being a high turnover product, and often not getting the level. You're not wearing the shoe out in most cases, especially with young children, before it's then discarded. And there's a real stigma attached to children wearing secondhand shoes due to it impacting how their feet are developing. So we really wanted to create a shoe that was 100% natural, and use wool as a key part of that. And so we've been, working with suppliers like natural fiber welding to create, an outsole that's 100% natural. And we've been working with different suppliers in the UK and Europe to provide, wool ingredients that can support thermoregulation. We've used wool that's more robust, I would say, than, fine merino wool, so that it can stand up to the rigor, that's expected in footwear. But not only the sustainability, but the biomechanics of the way the shoe is designed and constructed to specifically support, the different developmental stages of a child's growing foot. So that's for me as a passion project on the side, and really allows me to test out for real some of the opportunities I see in the market and bring those together. And as a mum of 2 boys, this is super relevant in my life.
I got testers
struggling to
already.
find trying to find decent shoes that look great, that aren't terrible for the environment, and that support their feet. So exciting times, and that's launching early next year. So watch this space.
Ooh, how exciting! That's fantastic news. I'm so excited to see these next steps, and also like I'm amazed of how you juggle everything. So you have 2 boys, you have a full-time job, and then a side project, let's just call it, which is a pretty big side project. Like, how do you do it?
I know, it's
It's
amazing. I think we're always
yeah.
capable than more than we realize. And I think when we're passionate about something, when something feels like
Yeah.
it's driving something other than, just making
The
money to
mundane.
survive and live,
Exactly.
it's very much a part of me. And you make it work one way or another.
And I can feel the energy from you as well coming through in that regard. I think that's just really lovely to see. I mean, apart from championing wool and this amazing fiber, but then also just your drive to make products in general, just better. Essentially, I think is a really really beautiful thing.
Yeah, no, it's
Oh,
and it's lovely meeting so many passionate people along the
yeah,
way, and the people really make it,
yeah.
and I think wool particularly really brings people together. There's so
That's
many
so
passionate
interesting.
people in
It's
wool.
a woolly community out there. We need
We're a
to. I feel like I need to bring
community,
them
and
together somehow.
well, campaign for wool do a great job, and we had a launch event last night, just off Savile Row for Wool Month, which kicked off at
Okay,
the
of
beginning
course.
of October. And I mean, just looking around in that room, there's so many diverse people. It's
Yes.
lovely, from different parts of the country, from
Yeah.
Devon, from the Midlands, from Scotland, from Yorkshire, that all come
Yeah.
together to celebrate it. And I think what was really exciting for us this year was that the king had wanted to continue his patronage of the campaign. So he started it as Prince Charles 15 years ago, and when he became king, he inherited about 400 different, I guess, initiatives, and he had to reduce that, and campaign for wool was one that he chose to continue to support. And I think, just given his importance on the environmental stage and his influence, it really shows that wool is an important part of that. So it was a great validation.
Fantastic. And
um,
Wool Month. Tell me more about this. I have seen the campaign for Wool Month, and is that just to raise awareness on basically everything we've kind of talked about today, really, or is
yeah.
there anything else to add to it that we may have missed?
Yeah, so it started out as Wool Week, and
Oh,
so
did
it's
it? I
grown
did not
now into Wool Month,
know
which is great news.
this.
It's
Yeah,
not gone
but
the other
why?
way.
Perfect. Why this particular month though? It's
I suppose it's we're stepping into autumn. We're
Hmm.
starting to, change up our wardrobes from the summer, and
Okay, yeah, that makes
it's a
sense.
moment. Yeah, it's a moment when people can think, "Huh, wool. This is something I want to
It's
have
nice
in
and
my
warm.
wardrobe." Or
Yes.
yeah, there's something special about this fiber, and it's a chance for all of the retailers that are supporters of the campaign. So we have manufacturers, we have retailers, educational sort of institutions, many different stakeholders that might want to pledge their support for the campaign. And that's just literally done by saying, I'd like to support. There's no money or anything involved. It's really just supporting a movement to raise awareness. And it was started because the king had his properties and was getting a very small wool check, and he realized that this was a real problem for the British wool growers, and he wanted to really raise awareness of the value of wool, and to raise it in people's minds, and to have a moment in time where the retailers could sort of push it to the forefront of their offering. And so retailers will maybe do different windows, and there'll be different pop-up events, really just to raise awareness amongst consumers about wool and how
Oh.
great it is.
It is amazing. Have you got what's your highlights coming up for this month then, event wise?
Yeah, so we had a nice ramp up actually to Wool Month with the London Design Festival. We had a couple of events that took place there, including material matters. So looking at the built environment, 'cause again, wool is touching us in so many aspects of our lives. So it was nice to be in the sort of architecture, interior design space. And then we had the launch last night. We've got a women in tailoring event happening next week. I think worsted wovens is really suffered with the movement to go towards knits and casualization and comfort. And obviously during COVID we weren't going out. Formal dressing has really dropped, because we just want things to be more versatile. We want to be more comfortable. So we're looking at how we can reframe the use of worsted woven materials, and redefine what the suit is, what it means, how it should look. And particularly for women in the workplace and business, feeling good in what they're wearing, and tailoring being a part of that. So we've got that going on next week. We've got Vitale Barberis Canonico, who are a very prominent Italian vertical manufacturer, have invited, I think, 5 or 6 tailors from around the world that are coming at tailoring from very different points of view. So not traditional Savile Row, but we've got a tailor in Northampton, for instance, and someone from Scotland, and just using their fabric in different ways. And that will be showcased at the Wellington Arch, actually, which is a really beautiful location in the middle of October. And yeah, other events that retailers have got going on throughout the month. So yeah, if you're interested, check out the Campaign for Wool website.
That was a great pitch. I am definitely checking it out. I am very much interested in the female tailoring as well. This is quite an interesting focal point. I've never considered, so yeah, an event based
Yeah,
around that concept. I don't know
yeah, and
why. I
whether
think it's probably
it's,
because I don't. Yeah, yeah,
I was going to say, whether it's vintage jackets and
yeah.
separates, and how to style those, and thinking about suiting from more accessible brands like COS or Marks and Spencers or Reese, just making it more accessible, not quite as stiff. The construction might be more comfortable, softer lines. And do you know what? It's so hard, sadly, in women's wear to find wool. Even in some of the higher end brands like Me&M or Jigsaw, they often water down the fabrications with polyester or
Yes, they
viscose,
do. Yeah, and the
which is
main
a tough
reason is
one.
price. It's
Mm,
price. I have amazing wool blended palazzo trousers from COS, and they're fantastic. I absolutely love them,
Yeah.
but it's still a blend. And the key reason is well, it's also, if they don't want to use merino, it's hand feel, but then
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
also a cost. And you're going
Yeah.
back to the point we were discussing earlier. It's how do you one, do you change consumer behavior to like buy less, but that's also still not achievable for everyone. It's like we can't take away fast or cheap fashion. It's like we can't take away fast food. It's embedded into our culture now, so how do we work with it
Yeah.
long
Yeah.
term? And then how do you, yeah, re- reduce that fiber cost and compared to synthetics? And it's super super hard.
Yeah, you're
I'm
right.
I haven't
It's
got the
yeah.
answer, but
No, I
it's
know.
all to do with cost. It's also, when I buy 100% wool fabrics, or at least 90%, it can be like 30-40% more than a blend. That's a lot of
Yeah.
money. So I'm
Yeah.
all for it, but then I might have a finance team or my product development team go, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "It's
Yeah.
great though,"
Yeah.
and they're like, "No," and I'm like, "Ah." So it's not
Yeah.
just the individuals. I think it's seeing that wool community, which I absolutely love. It's in my head now. Um, Within the actual brands themselves, like the teams working together under like one idea, one concept, one vision, opposed to just one or two people bringing in these amazing wools and everyone else kind of shooting them down. And then you just like, let's just step back and take a bigger picture there. How can we work these fabrics into a collection? Can we take away other fabrics? Like what agile
Yeah.
systems can we play? And I think the smaller
Yeah.
brands or medium-sized brands are definitely have the capacity to do that. Bigger brands is a little bit trickier. You just have more people you need to sign the products off, basically.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
yeah.
it's challenging, isn't it? And I feel that it's just about how much we consume and just that need to be buying something new all the
Exactly.
time. And I think
Yeah.
buy less, buy better. If you're going to spend some money on it, buy something that's going to last and stand the test of time and have that sort of emotional durability. That timeless product. And also, I think secondhand and vintage. A lot of people cherish their wool garments and want to pass those on into,
Yeah.
secondhand shops and what have you. So there's definitely opportunity just to shop more broadly
Yep.
for products. And I think what I would say is to check the label. We have something called Make the Label Count,
Mm.
which is a campaign that Woolmark and the natural fiber industry support, and just be a bit more intentional about what you're buying,
Yeah.
and then I think, of course, it's up to everyone's needs and individual situations. But I think just as a society, being more aware of what we're purchasing and trying to
Yeah.
purchase better, perhaps spend buy less. It's better for the
I
environment,
know.
and repair
Yeah.
clothes as well. I mean, I know it takes
Yeah.
time, and I certainly haven't got loads of time to patch up
Mm.
any moth holes. I have this pile that I keep thinking I'm going to
I
get
need
there one day. If I have just a
yeah.
moment, I'll get my
Yeah.
needle and thread and see what I can do. But often, that doesn't happen. So,
Yeah, completely. And I think I completely agree with you that it would be amazing if people could be more aware of their labeling and could actually afford to maybe still buy one or two things. But I think the brands in itself, it still comes back to the brands. Not everyone has the time to learn about the labeling. Not
no,
everyone has like the bandwidth to do so. And like you also have like maybe single mothers or single fathers who still need to buy products, but they still can't buy it less. So for me, it still goes back to the brands that they should take agency over the product that they are
yeah,
putting out there, because it's like going back to the fast food companies or like those big companies putting all the crap
yeah,
in the food, and actually they
yeah.
should be the ones accountable for of all the numbers and what have you, that is like giving us a really bad diet. But
You're right.
yeah, no, I
You're
completely
right.
see both sides. I think it's an amalgamation of everything we've discussed, and what percentage I'm not too sure, but it is, isn't it?
It's tough,
um
and I think we need better legislation
yes, definitely. Yeah.
to
Yeah.
push brands into making better decisions, and because they won't do that on their own.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but but that's also challenging. So
It is.
you're right. There's no
Oh.
silver bullet, but it's you got to be in the fight, right? You got to be in
Yeah,
it.
exactly. I think it's just even
And
just caring to begin with is helpful. Like, there's us saying, "Hey, you should be
yeah,
doing this. You should be doing that." And I mean, like, who are we to say this? So I think it's just spreading education and hoping it will like stick, essentially. Is there any
yeah.
anything before we kind of wrap up this really beautifully and like insightful chat that you feel is missing in the wool space, or any type of collaboration, because that's like my favorite word, I feel, that is missing? Is it more legislation and onboarding more people who are involved in that, and policymakers, and is that lawyers, is that, I don't know, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've got so much going on. I think, and
Yeah.
I'm really excited to be part of a time when collaboration is so valued, and walls are coming
Yeah.
down, and there is more transparency. It's all going in the right direction. And we do have legislation, coming in with the EU Green Deal, which is really promising. But at the same time, it's super challenging, because you have politicians and that are making decisions about things that they perhaps don't have so much information on, and this is a battle that we've got in that, when you're dealing with people and you're dealing with complex supply chains, it's really hard to put it into a black and white system. And I think we're always going to be, rallying against that. And I think I've learned that stuff that we um, felt was so certain, such as, wool not contributing to microplastics, wool being renewable, wool being biodegradable, is no longer enough, because it's about circularity now. So it's not about biodegradability. And it's amazing how some of the narratives have emerged, via, I guess, the synthetics industry, that have really challenged wool. And this is great, because I think we rested on our laurels for too long, that we had this great fiber. And so, we're really doubling down as a community to look at how we can reduce the impact of wool going through the value chain. And I'm really excited to be a key part of how we can ensure that wool stays relevant, and how we can bring brands and customers closer to the source, closer to wool growers. Certifications are great, they're important, but we need to make sure that we're doing things for the right reasons, and that we really understand. I'm not saying it's easy, we really understand the difficulties that wool growers have on farm. We understand some of the constraints, and we invest in those people to make improvements. And, I guess something that's hard for us is that, the certifications try to do that, but there's a lot of cost involved. And when growers aren't getting a premium for different sorts of wools, there's not a huge amount of incentive for them to put the money in. So it's about bringing those two worlds closer together, and I guess and this is difficult, especially when you've got people at other ends of the world. But even just in the UK, and companies like the Savory Institute, and just making people more aware of the opportunities that can be had to make positive decisions. So it's not just about reducing the amount of synthetics, it's about what can we do to regenerate, and
Hmm.
what can growers be doing to increase diversity, and more positive work that we can do to support the environment, not just about reducing. So yeah, I'm excited to be part of a collaborative industry. We've got lots of challenges that we're facing, and I'm keen to bring grower and customer closer together. I think there's so much to go at,
Yeah.
and yeah, just I feel grateful to be part of that process.
Oh, that was beautiful. That was beautifully summarized. Thank you so much. Those highlights, I think everyone kind of take away now and digest and see if they're keen. Hopefully, we have inspired them to be interested and and keen to move forward how they can make an impact within the wool industry. And I can see your love for it, especially after 17 years at Woolmark. It's still there. It's so nice.
No, I'm
So
very
thank you so
lucky.
much, Rebecca.
Thank you, Emma. It's been a real pleasure talking to you. Thank you
Oh,
for the
thank you.
invitation.
Likewise. I really appreciate. Oh, I've really appreciated your time, and I think I'm going to put some of the key links that we discussed in the description as well, so people have like a reference point to go back to. But thank you
Yeah.
so much, and
Yeah.
everyone, please tap into the events that are happening in Wool Month
Yeah.
for October.
Thank
It's
you.
some exciting things going on. Transcend Matter is a series-based podcast with monthly bonus episodes. We would love you to join our material community, so please do follow us. This will really help spread all the information we have here to a wider audience. We hope you have been inspired and will join us on the next show. This podcast was brought to you by Studio Osmo, bringing together a collection of minds and skills to accelerate future innovation within materials.